All right, everybody. I am here with Tom Myers, sound designer, sound editor, re-recording mixer. Chances are, if you watched any sort of Pixar film in the mid 2000s or even nowadays, actually, then this guy has been behind the scenes in the sound department making everything come together. So, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much, Tom, for taking time out of your schedule to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
Oh, sure. My pleasure. My pleasure. Happy to do it. I appreciate your interest.
Yeah. So, just to kind of give listeners some background, how did you start your career in sound design? Where did you get started?
Well, I grew up in the '70s, which was the hot era for film, in the States, and so I wanted to be, wanted to be involved in film in some way. So I went to film school out in Northwestern outside of Chicago, and then came out to California for the graduate film program at San Francisco State. And then I sort of lasted about a semester there and decided I wanted some real world experience and started looking around. And at that point, sound was not, I'd made student films, but sound I always found a little bit intimidating, a little technical, and I didn't have a big background in it. But I got a job at a motion picture lab back when they were processing film in San Francisco. And then I knew somebody there who was got a job at when Skywalker Ranch was just opening, and this was way back in the late '80s, and they were looking for people to staff up to be projectionists and transfer operators and stuff like that. And so I had an opportunity to apply, and then just started as a projectionist and transfer operator. And then I realized I had fallen into Clover. I'd fallen into this place where some of the best people in the sound world, uh, Ben Burt, Walter Murch, I worked with Gary Rydstrom. So some of the best people in the field were here. And then from that point, I realized how lucky I was to be here and how creative sound could be, how much of an impact it could have on filmmaking and storytelling. And so that was my entree into it. I came about it in a roundabout way. I always wanted to be a picture editor, and then just kind of lucked into this area where some of the Mount Rushmore type people were working, and I got a chance to be here and learn from some of the best folks who've ever done it.
All right. And you're still at Skywalker Sound,
I
right?
am. Yep, yep. And so it's over 30 years now, which is hard to believe. So it's over like half my life. So it's
Ooh.
wild. So uh,
Um, and what was one of the first bigger projects that you did sound design for?
well, I started doing sort of work my way through all these different things. I started, as I say, just doing sound transfer, and then I worked in recording and mixing Foley, which is doing that, and I learned how to sort of EQ and learned about microphones and sound recording, and then I moved into assisting Gary Rydstrom on a number of projects like Terminator 2, which was a huge learning experience for me, and then assisted him on the first Toy Story and sort of learned a lot about sound animation stuff. And then Gary had a relationship with a Japanese producer named Nomura, and so he introduced me to Nomura-san, and they were doing JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. They were doing these 6 30-minute anime productions of that, and so that was the first time I was kind of sound designing and mixing on my own, and was working with another terrific young composer, Marco D'Ambrosio, who composed music for all those. And so it was a small team and we did everything on our own. Myself and a guy named John Countryman. We did basically all the sound effects together, and then mixed, and Margaret did all the music. And so it was one of those jobs where everybody had been an assistant and then had an opportunity to do something a little bit more. So that was my first foray into it. And it was great because the nature of that was like nothing could be kind of too big or too fantastic, or they were Nomura-san and the director, Hiro Kitakubo, they were open to all sorts of ideas. Nothing could be, it was the best way to work, where you have somebody who has a vision but is open to collaborate. So we could try all these different things and put all these different sort of sounds together, and it was also fantastic in the nature of it. The characters were transforming and changing, and they all had superpowers, and each one had to have kind of a different stand, a different sort of alternate superpower or alternate identity that they could call up and do things with. So it was a great learning experience, and that was sort of the first time I was sort of thrown into the deep end and kind of doing it on my own.
Kind of going into the realm of Jojo, actually, just kind of getting all these questions out of the way.
Yeah.
What was it like working with the Jojo franchise as a whole, between the 90s OVAs and the Phantom Blood film, and what was your overall experience like?
Well, it changed a little bit. So the first time, and I have to say, I was sort of insulated. We just did our work, and we worked specifically with this producer and a couple of different directors. And so they were, all the work was being done, all the visuals were being done in Japan. So we were over here kind of on our own, just doing the sound work and doing the music and the mix. So I was kind of insulated from the rest of the world. Didn't really have a sense as to how popular it was. I still have some of the manga books, so I knew there was a history to it, but I was not hip to, well, a lot of anime, sort of at that point. So I felt very insulated by it. We just sort of did our work and cast it off into the world, and didn't sort of know what kind of impact it was having. Never really was clear how much of an impact it was having. We were just kind of focused on the work that we were doing. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah. Um, and I know that the 90s OVAs, they were done in those half-hour episodes, as you said, but when you did the film, the Phantom Blood film in 2007, was there any sort of um difference in how grandiose the sound had to be, or was there like any sort of difference in the process?
Well, the technology was a little bit different then. When we first started, we're still in an analog mode, so we were still sort of cutting on a sampler and then dumping it onto a 24 track, onto tape, and then mixing off of that. By the time 2007, later on, we were fully digital at that point, so the workflow was a little bit different, but we were still in the way trying to be true to the world that we had created before. So the sound work was the same, but the way that we did it was different. I mean, the technology is accelerating in film sound. It was done in the same way for many, many years. And then once digital came in, it started to change rapidly. Every few years, there was some new way to work, new format to work in. So the technology changed, but the way we did it and the ideas that we were using didn't really change.
Um, back when Gary introduced you to Nomura-san, was there any sort of language barrier that you had to overcome in that regard? Because I know you said you worked over here in the States while the people in
Yes.
Japan were doing their own thing, but was there
Yeah.
still some sort of language barrier you had to hop over to make things
Well,
work?
we had translators, a couple of different translators who we worked with and got very close with, and um, a woman named uh, Yumi Hawashi was terrific. She was instrumental in that. She worked for Nomura-san. She worked for APPP, and there was before that there was a woman, Sharon Frome, who was also a translator. They spoke, both Japanese and English, and they would help us because some of the concepts of this stuff were hard to, um, were very sort of ethereal or ephemeral, or were like hard to understand, why these characters transitioned, what they transitioned into, what their motivations were, what the emotions were, what they wanted it to sound like. It was not just like, okay, well, this is a gunshot or this is a car door close. It was like this character changes into this thing because of this, or so the translation that we had with these folks was crucial, was really helpful. So that was, um, so there was a language barrier, but Morrison was very smart, and he understood a fair amount of English. There were a couple of times where he came over and we didn't have a translator. Neither Yumi wasn't available, or Sharon. So it was a little bit tricky uh, without a translator. So, but anyway, so there was this process of which I've done on a couple of other films as well, a couple of foreign films. There was so it's interesting where you have a translator and they have to be skilled in uh, not only just translating things literally, but also, in terms of aesthetics, in terms of like, what color should this be? How should it sound? Um, that sort of thing. So yeah, it was very, very, very interesting.
Um, um, Lost my train of thought again. I apologize.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah, that might be a common theme throughout this. My brain's a little slow
Oh,
sometimes.
okay. All right. Don't worry.
Um, so you mentioned Gary, and he worked with you on the 90s JoJo OVAs. Did he return for the Phantom Blood film, or?
No, actually, and Gary didn't work. He sort of handed off the project to me. He was on to other things, doing bigger stuff. So in my, he kind of, and this happened a number of times on a number of, my association with Pixar came through Gary Rodstrom as well. So a lot of the opportunities I had, especially early on, came as a result of him recommending me to somebody. So um, so no, Gary was not involved, but again, he was a great resource and still is. I mean, it still to me is the person whose sort of opinion around sound and the aesthetics of sound I value the most. So it's like I've always looking to play stuff for him and say, is this a good idea? Does this come across? What do you think of that? He's very, I mean, there's a reason he's one of the best people in the field. He's very smart and very quick in his study. He can look at something and break it down in a way and come up with really interesting ideas. One of the things about sound is not thinking literally. Oftentimes the literal approach is the least interesting approach. So you look at something and you think, well, it needs to be this, it needs to be a little bit bigger. Um, So he's very smart about that. So I still rely upon him to for his um, aesthetic taste and his looking at something. So uh, anyway, so he's still somebody I go to for about that sort of things. But again, I'm very lucky. There are a number of people here. Randy Tom is another one who I've worked with. That I work with. I don't know if you're familiar with Ghost in the Shell and the director Mamoru Oshii. I've done a number of films with him too, which is very um, uh, similar. That I was thinking about that in terms of the translation stuff, where you're dealing with these sort of deep aesthetic ideas and trying to deal with somebody, and you have this, you don't speak the same language, but you find a way to sort of get these ideas across or have them explain ideas to you as well. So anyway, so I've been lucky here in that way and worked with a number of different great sound designers and sort of really interesting directors. So
Yeah. Um, so were there any other people from here in the States that worked on Phantom Blood, or was it mostly just you and Marco?
it was pretty much me and Marco are people here. There were another people. I think I'd have to go back and even look at the credits on that. I think Al Nelson was very crucial in that. He's very successful supervisor and designer in his own right now. So, um, but I'd have to go back and look at the credits because even the 2007 was 14 years ago. So,
Yeah.
I had this thing where it's like once you're done with a project, you're kind of on to the next one. And so sometimes it's hard to remember, what you did and who you worked with on that, since you're so focused on the next one. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's something I understand
yeah,
completely.
yeah.
Um
You're very focused on the thing that you're doing now. And then it is this thing where sometimes you don't even know, how did we do that? How did we come up with that stuff? So, but it's a lot of experimentation and stuff. And again, also I can't emphasize enough Marco D'Ambrosio's contribution, not only for the music, which is beautiful and really interesting. He's just like an amazing collaborator and very smart, very generous, got a great understanding of all this stuff. So we sort of relied on him a lot too. As you may know, sometimes music and sound effects don't always work that well together. Sometimes they're in a conflict with each other because they're trying to cover the same thing. You have something that you look at and music is scoring it, and sometimes they're scoring explosions and impacts and stuff like that, and sound effects are doing the same. So they lie on top of each other. So in a perfect world, you want them offset a little bit. You want the music to be doing one thing and sound effects to be doing something else and have them work together. So uh, I can't emphasize enough what a great collaborator Marco was.
I'll definitely say this. I think just sound design in general is very overlooked when you think about um, film, just nowadays and
Yeah,
even sometimes back then, because yeah, you have great visuals, but what really makes that punch so impactful, or that explosion so powerful, is the sound that comes with it,
right.
especially when you're in a theatrical setting.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I when I went to go see Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker,
hmm,
and they had the scene where Palpatine shoots lightning up into the air, and in the theater you just heard nothing but bass, and it
yeah,
just
yeah,
emphasized how
yeah,
truly powerful he was, and it was just
yeah,
such a cool experience to me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's true. It's a shame that the theaters are struggling now, and the theatrical experiences, like people get an opportunity not only to see it in like a full theatrical experience, but also experiencing it with other people, be in a room, with 300 or 500 other people, and sort of have that same experience. So I'm hoping that doesn't that will come back at some point, but yeah, the industry is changing a little bit. The way we consume things, the way we watch things and hear things. But I appreciate that about what you say about sound. All you need to do is kind of turn the sound off on your TV or something like that. And again, the visuals are very important, but we say here a lot. There was a George Lucas quote that we, you know, use here a lot, that sound is half the experience of seeing a movie. So George was very forward thinking about that, and valued it a lot. So that's the sort of kernel of this place. It sort of comes from George's appreciation of sound, and then the people that he hired, Ben Burt, initially, or, Walter Murch before that, and then Ben Burt. And um, so George was always, aside from being a great filmmaker, is very smart about technology and storytelling, and forward thinking storytelling, how to use different things. He was kind of ahead of the curve in terms of digital editing, and always moving things forward. So uh, again, I was very lucky to get a chance to work here.
So just the last couple of JoJo related questions.
Mhm.
So when I was doing my initial research, it said you worked on the more recent JoJo adaptation. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what that is. I think 2007 was probably the last time we did that. I know, again, it's all a bit of a blur. We did an English language version of some of the stories, and then there was Phantom Blood. But 2007 was probably the last time I did anything for that. I have to go back and look, but it's been a while.
Yeah, I just saw it on the IMDb page. It said you worked on, I think it was like there was like 20 some episodes of the it was around the mid 2010s, somewhere in that area.
I
I don't know
don't
if
think so. I've gone on IMDb and watched some of the sections of some of the updates of that, and I already see it. Like, I think there's some stuff on Netflix too, but I don't know where that was done. And I didn't work. It's been, I think Phantom Blood might have been the last thing I JoJo related thing I worked on. I'm not sure if Nomura-san is still involved, or his production company is doing it, or whether he passed that on to somebody else. But I think we um, um, stopped about that time, so we haven't done anything for a while.
I know the production companies changed. It went over from APPP to David Production,
Hmm.
but I don't know if Nomura-san would still be involved with that or
Well, I think APPP, which was another, what was it? Another post-pin production, I think is what
yeah,
stood
another
for.
pushpin planning, I
Push-pin
think it
production.
was.
Yes, yes. I don't think he was involved after that. I think after, and again, I haven't looked at the credits or anything like that, but I'm not sure that he was involved after that. So
And um give me a second. My brain's
sure,
catching up.
no problem.
um would there be anyone besides Marco? I actually reached out to Marco for an interview. I haven't heard back from him yet.
Yeah.
But would there be anyone that I could contact about Phantom Blood and just how it was made, what ended up happening to it? Because it's,
Boy,
I
I
mean,
don't.
I
I have to think about that. I don't know. I'm not sure who that would be at this point. Again, that seems so long ago. It's like hard for me to remember what the production of that, because it was very fast. It was the earlier stuff is more in my memory. I think we we worked very quickly on Phantom Blood. Um, so I would have to think about that, but no, aside from Marco, nobody comes to mind because it was just, we were sort of insulated. We worked with Nomura-san and worked here, so there wasn't a big team of people. So I can't, um, I'd have to think about that. So sorry, that's
Um,
not a great answer, but
if you do happen to think of anyone besides Marco, do you think you could send me an email or something?
sure, yeah. If something occurs to me, yeah, happy to send you an email about it. So
That'd be great.
yeah.
So kind of moving away from the JoJo realm,
Mhm.
um, since technology has advanced so far, both in film industry and just in general, what kinds of programs do you use nowadays, and even some of the ones back then that you used to create um, sounds and do the final mixes?
Well, it's moved. When I first started, it was a lot of analog stuff, and again, we used this sampler, which you can't see, I'm looking at here, called a synclavier, which was very popular in the uh, late '80s, early '90s. Frank Zappa had one. Michael Jackson used them. They were very facile in changing and combining sounds and putting stuff on a keyboard and sort of playing it and performing it, and so that was the thing, and as I said, we would sort of cut on that and then dump it onto tape. Now it's all Pro Tools based. It's all digital, and Pro Tools is sort of the preeminent form. I still use this synclavier because I learned on it. I started on it, but it's now Pro Tools is the becoming the dominant platform for sound editing and mixing and stuff like that. I know it's used a lot in music as well. There was a period of time where there were some different systems that we're jockeying about, but Pro Tools is now kind of taken over. So that's the format that or the platform that everybody's kind of cutting on. Music, I think it's different. There's some different or music composing. I think there's some different stuff, but anyway, so that's the technology is all it's all digital now. So um, which is good because you can change things quickly and move data around quickly, in a way that you couldn't before. So, um, but anyway,
Yeah,
so I'm happy that I started in the analog world, but I see the advantages of working in digital now.
yeah. Do you what? Excuse me. Were there any sound effects that you made throughout your career that had like an unexpected source to them? Like you think about back in the day how when Star Wars was first being made, how they did the lightsaber effects where it was just waving a microphone in front of a speaker.
Hmm.
But over your career, do you think there's been like a really weird source that you got for a sound effect?
God, I'm trying to think. I'd have to look at my uh, library, and I'm trying to think of the. Well, I've done a ton of recording. Each project has its own sort of um, demands of stuff. So I'm trying to think on like, we've done a ton of recording, like cars. We recorded a ton of different um, cars for that. I know what you're really asking for is something, some of like what Ben did, where it was just this inventive thing. That idea of taking something that is not literal and using it for uh, something else. So the other example, which isn't mine, again, is Gary's. There's a scene in Terminator 2, which I always refer to, where the T-1000 is going through the bars in the in the hospital where it's uh, come to try and get Sarah Connor, and he's moving through the bars. And initially, they had done something that was more kind of synthetic and tonal, and James Cameron wanted it to sound very organic, and so we recorded uh, the sound of dog food coming out of a can, and used that for it. Had this really um, very visceral, organic feel to it. Again, that was Gary's genius, not mine. But that was one of the sounds that I always refer to, where you think in a non-literal way. Again, of trying to come up with something that was interesting like that. So
Um, kind of a more specific example, but this is something I've been wondering for a long time. In Star Wars Episode 3, which you worked on that, right?
that was Revenge of the Sith.
Yep.
Yep.
So in that scene when Count Dooku's on his knees and Palpatine tells Anakin to kill him, and he ends
Yep.
up doing it, there's that weird sound that comes out as Dooku's head is rolling on the floor. It's like that really high, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like metallic
Mm-hmm.
in a way. It's I've I've never like I've always tried to figure out what that sound was or what it was
Right.
supposed to be. But
Right.
I just could never put the pieces together. Just
Yeah, I have to go back and watch that. I remember the scene, and that was again, Ben Burt was the designer on that, so he had a vision for all that stuff. So what I did on that was I was cutting effects and then mixing the effects on that project. So it was something that Ben had come up with, um, that we used, but I don't remember specifically what that was. He had, but he has an encyclopedia knowledge of that sort of stuff, and so he had. And again, it was also sort of keeping things consistent in the world of the Star Wars world. But yeah, you know what, I should go back and watch that. That's actually one of my favorite work experiences too, because it was really exciting, and it's one of my favorite movies too. One of my favorite Star Wars movies, frankly. So
same here, honestly.
great
Like
acting in that, and a dark ending, you know. So um, good acting too.
oh yeah, they had some of my favorite lightsaber fights. The story was intriguing,
Yeah,
um, and whenever I talk to some friends of mine who are Star Wars fans, they prefer the original trilogy, and
yeah, yeah,
honestly, I can understand why.
yeah,
But I always tell them Episode 3 for me,
yeah,
that always has a spot in my heart. It's just it looks cool, it
yeah,
sounds cool.
yeah,
John Williams's score, oh my goodness.
yeah,
I could
yeah,
I could go on for hours about
yeah,
John Williams and his
yeah.
work, but
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. That's of the second trilogy. I think that's the best film. Attack of the Clones has some great scenes in it, some great battle scenes and stuff. But then it also has sort of the love story component in that, um, but yeah, Attack of the Clones. If you look at some of the battle scenes in that, that's great as well.
yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into just big scenes like that. You think of like the plains of Geonosis, you see all the clones and the Jedi on the battlefield, and you
Yeah,
think there's no way they got hundreds of people on there at once. But no, it's just CGI work, and it's
yeah,
something that
yeah,
wasn't really seen in film before.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then multi-tracking the sound too to make crowds bigger and stuff like that was great. So yeah, yeah, that was amazing. It was a great experience. It was also early on in the digital realm too, that we um, the way we did that. So uh, that was groundbreaking as well.
Yeah. Um. So so you mentioned you had like a library of sounds. So do you happen to reuse some sounds in one project to be used in a different project?
Yeah, I mean, you're always trying to come up with new stuff. Oftentimes, the time is short, budgets are getting, a little bit smaller and schedules are tighter. And so, yeah, so we have a giant database. I have my own library, and then we have a giant database of all the films that have been done here, and it all gets dumped into this database that you can then call up and go, type in sad gunshot or something like that, or so, descriptive things, and then stuff will come up. I was just working on a fight scene now, and I needed some body hits on a cement wall. So I was like, okay, look for body hits on a hard surface, and then sort of go through and find stuff that way. But again, you always try and come up with your own stuff, or I always go to my library first, and then if I can't find something there, then I go to the general library. So, but yeah, yeah. So that's it. It's ever growing, and it's a big, it's one of the great values of working here. There's just this library that goes back to, American graffiti. I mean, it goes back to stuff in the 70s, and it just gets built and grows exponentially with each new project. So,
Um, you kind of touched on this earlier as we were talking about Gary, but how did you end up working on so many Pixar films? How did that come about?
well, it was basically through Gary. Started assisting him on the first Toy Story, and then a number of the other ones, and then when let's see, what was he? I think Cars was the first one that I sound designed on my own, where I was the lead sound designer on that. So that was happened through Gary, and Gary was leaving and going to work at Pixar at that time. And so he recommended that I think the next one in their pipeline was Cars. And so he recommended that I recommended me to them, and I went and met John Lasseter, and we talked about stuff and saw early, versions of the film. It's always interesting to see those films in storyboard before they're all done. I always tell the story of seeing the first Toy Story just in black and white storyboards without any animation or anything like that. And the story was so strong, and the characters were so interesting just in that. Everything, it was like all going to be, gravy after that. So it's like that's one of the things I think Pixar has done so well, is realize that it's really all about having a good and strong emotional story. So anyway, so that's was through Gary. I did that, and then worked on a number of uh, different projects for them, and then so yeah, I'm particularly proud of the Toy Story stuff. So having worked on assisted on the first Toy Story, and then did some co-sound design in the second Toy Story, again working for Gary, and then was the sound designer on the third Toy Story. So anyway.
Speaking of Toy Story, actually, um, how how difficult was it to try and emulate the sound of the sounds, I should say, of like toys clacking against the floor, or like how Buzz Lightyear is made out of plastic, but Woody is like a stuffed doll. Like
Yeah.
how how difficult was it to try and emulate sounds like that?
Well, that was, again, it was a lot of the same people, and a lot of that stuff, the physical movement of them. Some of it was recorded, but a lot of it was the Foley team, which was initially Denny Thorpe, and the first one might have been Marnie Moore, but then Jana Vance came on. She did the other ones. They had their, one artist would do one character, and the other artist would do the other character. One would do all the woody stuff, and the other would do all the buzz stuff. And so there's personality, a lot of that personality of the tactile nature that comes from the Foley artists.
And over the span of your career, um, do you have a favorite film that you always, or do you have a film that you just always look back fondly on, like, oh yeah, this was like my magnum opus as a sound designer? Do you?
Well, I have the one I always say is the movie called Dogma, that was Kevin Smith directed it, and it was the first we did in, I don't know, half a dozen movies with Kevin and his producer Scott Mosier. But Dogma, uh, I still say it was like one of the best experiences I ever had, because I loved the movie. It was really funny, and it was kind of like I loved all the characters. The Kevin and his producer Scott were great guys, really fun, great collaborators, fun to be around. We laughed a ton on that. It was like the best work experience, because it was and I had an opportunity to sound design, to do some really creative stuff. So it was like all that stuff, and we worked on it a number of off and on over the course of a year, and got to know them. And so it was just, to me, it was the trifecta. It was like, I love the movie, I love the people, and I got to do really creative stuff. So it was what I always wanted the work to be. And I realized it's not always like that you want to love the people that you work with, you want to laugh a lot and do good stuff on films that you like. And it doesn't always, that I realize that doesn't happen. That's a little bit lightning in a bottle. It's only happened a few times where it's that just all the stuff kind of comes together like that. Um, so that, I always say Dogma was probably the best work experience I have. I will, before we end, I will recommend this one other film I just worked on, which is on Netflix now, called Seven Prisoners, which is this from a Brazilian American director named Alex Morato. And I liked that movie a lot, and that was a great experience too. So the best experiences are one where you're working with a director who has a real vision of what they want to do. So they have ideas, but they're also receptive to the ideas that you might come up with as well. So.
And that reminds me of something that my professors always try and nail into our heads, and I always try to nail into other people's heads if they want to get into the media production field. And that's that if you wouldn't read it, if you wouldn't listen to it, if you wouldn't watch it, then why do it at all?
Right.
You deserve to do what you're passionate in.
Yeah. Yes. There's the work is so hard, or so there's so much, it's so demanding in so many ways, that's like, and I feel very fortunate to have worked in a field where I still love what I do, so it's like, yeah, and not everybody has that luxury to be able to do that. But if you're starting now, if you're a young person starting now, just pursue the thing that you love, and everything else will kind of take care of itself. I mean, you can, shoot for money or prestige or whatever, but do the thing that you're most passionate about, and you kind of can't go wrong.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
um
Okay.
so as we're kind of wrapping up here,
Yeah.
you kind of answered the next question I had. I
Good.
was going to ask, do you have any advice for any aspiring people who want to go into the realm of sound design and things of that nature?
Yes. I mean, aside from pursuing something that you love, do just start recording and build your own library, and start playing with stuff now, and think in non-literal ways, and just listen. When you go outside, or look at anything, you know, just use your ears as well as your eyes. But I always tell young people who are starting out, just start recording stuff. The equipment is now pretty cheap. You can get a Zoom recorder for a couple of $100 and just start building your own library. You will not be sorry. So,
And that's actually just about all the questions I
good.
have.
All right.
Thank
Good. Well,
you.
thank you for your interest.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much, as I said, for taking time out of your schedule. I know you're a busy person nowadays, and
Yeah,
as everybody is, but
exactly. It's that time. There's a lot to do. So,
oh yeah.
but I
Um,
appreciate it. Yeah.
any
Good.
other questions for me before we wrap up here?
No, I don't think so. And again, appreciate your interest and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate
Sure.
it.
All right. My pleasure. Well, take care now.
Yep, you too.
Okay.
I might get back in contact with you just to see if you found anyone to contact regarding Phantom Blood, but that might not
Sure.
be for a while. So,
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I'll try and think about it and see if I can come up with any other names. So,
all right, sounds good.
all right. Fair enough. All right. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye bye.
Bye.